In today's tutorial, I will show you how to use the React testing library to create your own test for your React application. To start, you first need to download something called Node.js, which you can download from this page. Just make sure to download for your specific machine. Once you have downloaded that, just open up your text editor and your terminal. And the first thing we're going to do is create a basic React application. And we can do that by typing in this command, which is npx create React app, followed by the name of the project. So I'll just do like testing tutorial for this example and hit enter, and I'll resume the video once this is done. And now that's done, I'll just switch into that folder that I just made and open up a new editor. If we look at the folder now, we can see that the Create React app created a bunch of folders for us. And if we open up the source folder, and we see that there's an app.test.js file, so just double click and open that. Go ahead and open up your terminal as well. And we can see that this is a very basic test that they created for us. And we can actually run this test by just typing the command npm run test and hit enter and hit A to run all the tests. And as you can see, all of the tests passed. Now to briefly explain what the test is doing, the first thing it does is renders the app that we imported on line 2. The second thing it does is tries to get the text element of learn React and store into this link element. And afterwards, we're just checking that the link element is inside the document. This might be easier to understand if we visually see what the React app looks like. And we can do that by opening another terminal and typing in the command npm run start and hit enter. But since mine is already running, I'm just going to switch to it. And this is what the React app looks like right now. And the initial test that we ran was checking for the text learn React that you see here. And now I will show you some of my own tests that I created and explain what each test is doing. Now I always put my screens side by side so I can more easily see what we're testing. Now I'll paste in my own version of a React app that has a little more functionality that we can test with. And I'll make sure to leave a link in the description so you can copy this code and follow along. I've also pasted in my own test here, and we're just going to go through each test one at a time, and I'll briefly explain what each one is doing. So the very first test is this test that we looked at earlier. I'm just going to run npm run test just to make sure it's passing, and hit A to run all the tests, and as you see, it's all passing. But if I were to change this to 3 and hit save, you can see that the test is now failing. And now I'll go ahead and explain the rest of the test I have. So I will comment out this first test and uncomment the second one. And as you see from the description, all this does is test for text on screen, so very similar to the one that we had before, except it's slightly different in how we're testing. And the main difference is that we're actually using a different function. Instead of using the getByText function, we're going to use the getByTestID and use it to locate the element that way. And how the getByTestID works is I'm actually labeling this paragraph with a data -test ID and naming it main text. And here you can see I'm just using this function getByTestID and passing in main text to be my link element. Afterwards, I'm just checking that the text content of my link element is equal to some text. And since it is, you can see that my test passes. And you can see that I have the text here that says some text. Now I'll explain the next test I have, and it's very similar to the test that we just ran, except the only difference is we're just typing in the word not in front of 2b. That way we're just testing for stuff that's not supposed to be on the screen. So as you can see here, I'm just typing the text hello world and expecting it not to be on the screen. I hit save. And as you see, it passes because the text hello world is not on the screen. However, if I were to go to my app.js file and change this to hello world instead, hit save, you can see that it's failing because it is finding the text hello world. So I just wanted to go through that example to explain how to check for text that's not on the screen. Now I'll go back to my testing file and explain the next test. And this test is just going to test that the increase counter button works as intended. So as you see here, when I click on increase counter, the counter goes up by 1. Now if we look back on my test file, we can see that this test is just increasing the counter button to add 1. And it's very similar to the previous test because I'm just using the getByTestID to target both the button and the counter. One difference is that I have two expect statements here. The very first expect statement expects that the counter is 0. So if I refresh the page, every time it gets refreshed, the counter is 0. So that's why I'm testing for that. Afterwards, I'm doing this fireEvent.click button to actually click on the button. And afterwards, I'm expecting the counter to be 1 because once I click on it once, as you see here, the counter is now 1. Looking back at the test file, I just want to elaborate a little bit more about fireEvent. This is an object that I import from testing library. And the fireEvent has access to a bunch of different actions. One of them is the click action. And here I'm just passing in the button that I targeted earlier and telling it to click the button. And that's why once it clicks the button, I'm just expecting the counter to equal 1 because it's just incrementing it from 0 to 1. And the next test I have is exactly the same, but instead of expecting it to add by 1, it will just subtract by 1. And I'll just hit save. And as you can see, the test passes because once I refresh the page and click on decrease counter, it goes to -1. And for this very last test, I'm actually just testing that whatever is typed inside this input box is displayed on the page as you see here. So if I just uncomment this last test and hit save, you can see that the test passes. Now if we look at the test, how it works is that we rendered the app just like with all the other tests. And here we're actually just using this get by placeholder text function and just passing in the placeholder text. So if I refresh the page, you can see that the placeholder text is just entering email. So that's how I'm targeting this input field. Afterwards, I'm just importing this user event object that I imported from the testing library and then typing in the email test@gmail.com. And I'm also passing in the email field that I targeted earlier. And for the last expect statement, I'm actually just using the screen dot find by text function to check that the test@gmail.com is visible. But if I were to change this email to anything else, let's say like test3@gmail.com, hit save, as you'd expect, the test fails because it doesn't find this exact email. But if I change it back, then the test will pass. And those are all the examples I have for this tutorial. Hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe for more content.